Hello Space Engineers, welcome to this short guide on how to set up and operate my workshop item, the automated tunnel boring machine. Now this drill is an upgraded version of the one that I constructed for my YouTube series Hephaestus Prime, and I did that in episode 19 Under the Mountain. It performed superbly for quite some time to dig a very big hole out of the ground where I now have my Fort Rutherford base. Most blueprints from Hephaestus Prime I upload to the Steam Workshop straight away, but I knew that this particular machine was just going to take a little bit of extra effort. So I've put together this version, and it's an upgraded version. One of the big changes is that it's fully automated. It actually captures the ore that it drills and turns that into steel to resource it to move forward. So let us get on with the video. To start with, I will paste a tunnel boring machine in creative mode. There are two blueprints that make it up. First of all, I've got the large grid main machine, and I'm going to attach that to a block that I placed earlier to make sure I get the right height. The small grid drill head is a separate blueprint, and we'll cover that in a minute. So of course we can do this in survival mode as well. So using a projector, once again I've used the main blueprint for the large grid, and we'll just set that going, and now I can weld this up. So I'm doing this in creative mode, so these are just popping in as soon as I weld them. Of course, if you're in survival mode, then you'll need to manufacture the resources and components to do this. Today I'm just going to weld up the critical components so I can show you how it works, and then we'll go back to the full creative version pasted one. Now these pink blocks don't need to be completely welded, they are just scaffolding that allows for the subgrid attached to this piston to be included in the blueprint and pasting and welding. That way there's no additional setting up of the toolbars or programming or anything like that. Okay, so I've welded quite a few of these blocks now. Crucially, I've welded this piston. Now it does add a piston head to it when you create it, but what we want to do is remove that and then extend the piston so it meets up with the piston head that's already attached to the block. And then we go into the piston menu and we attach the head to the piston. Now I'm using Build Vision here, but of course you can access this through the usual control panel menu. The maximum distance of the piston is set to 2.5 meters. You'll need to extend this out to 5 meters in order for it to reach the piston head. Just remember to reset that back to 2.5 meters. Now the piston is in the right place to reattach. I find that it doesn't necessarily work the first time. You may need to try it multiple times. Also getting rid of the scaffolding so that the subgrid is somewhat floating. Also you may need to unlock the landing gears. So I've done all that and still doesn't seem to be attaching. Just try and yeah, everything's all free, so I'll just try that again. There we go, it worked that time. Wasn't really anything different I did there, so it can be a little bit finicky as to whether it attaches or not. Right, so now we will retract the piston back into its stowed position, remembering to reset the maximum distance of the piston length to 2.5 meters. So there's a little bit of setup required to the piston when you are projecting in survival mode, but when you paste it in creative mode, that piston is already in place and attached with the correct maximum length setting. So all you need to do here is just break the pink scaffolding and it will retract back into its correct location, ready to go. Now this tunnel boring machine projects and then welds its own floor in front of it as it continues to advance ahead. Rather than getting you to download a third blueprint off the Steam Workshop, I've just included it here and you can make a blueprint of it and load it into the projector. Now I've got a grey concrete colour half block row of floor here, but you could use any colours that you wanted. You could also make it thicker bearing in mind that that will take more steel, so you can customize it to a certain extent. But I just deleted that blueprint I just created because I already have one in my catalogue, which is already loaded into this projector. Now you will need to get it into the right place, which is just the row in front of the welders. So I'll just delete some of these so you can see where it's at, and most importantly, getting that merge block in the right place. Now this sensor is a key component in this tunnel boring machine. We will talk about it more later, but just for now, before I put this drill head in, it does pay to have it switched off. Also just check that the rotor's not going to move as well. The settings do seem to change from when they were blueprinted to when they actually get projected or pasted. Ultimately this next bit goes a lot smoother if things keep still. So when we paste this machine in creative mode, this rotor will appear on the end of the piston. However, when we are welding a projection in survival mode, there won't be any rotor on the end here. It's just the piston head of the piston because it doesn't include subgrids. Now, either with build vision or through the advanced rotor control panel, we need to add a small grid rotor head, and then I've put on this small conveyor junction, which will give me somewhere to place a small grid projector. Now it doesn't matter whether we are in survival mode or creative mode, we need to project this small grid drill head and weld it up. Now of course small grids can't go into the ground, so that's why we're not able to paste it in creative mode. Also the game doesn't support mixing and matching subgrids, hence why I've had to publish the two separate blueprints on the Steam Workshop. Now I'll just line this up and then we will get welding. So bearing in mind that in creative mode, which I'm using, it's just going to pop straight in, whereas in survival mode you'll need to manufacture the components. Now it didn't take me that long to weld this up, maybe 5, possibly 10 minutes. And you'll see that I'm not able to get into the ground. So what I need to do is complete as much of it as I can, and then I'll turn the drills on and start them to rotate as you sit in the control seat spinning anti-clockwise. So there are downward facing drills on the end of each of the arms. So they just really help clear away the material on the edges so it doesn't get stuck. Alright, so now we'll turn the drills on and set the rotor going, and that way we can clear out some of the material. Sorry if it's getting a little bit loud, I'll try and edit that sound a bit quieter. As I do this, I've probably got the rotor going a little bit too quick. I've got it going at minus 0.4 rotations a minute, which is what you want it set for the tunnel boring, but just for this stage of clearing out material in front of the piston, probably went a little bit quick for me. Now I did eventually figure out that I just needed to turn it on to get it to work. So now I can just jump out with my hand drill, and using it on destroy mode, I'll just drill out in front of where it's rotating around. The drills get rid of most of the material themselves. It only very occasionally just gets caught on little bits. Normally just right here, just in front of the drill, sort of just above it, and on the back corner of the arm. So you soon figure out, as I say, it's probably going a little bit quick for me this time, and I am sort of struggling to keep up with it. But it doesn't actually cause any damage to the drill head, it just sort of jams up until you free it and makes all sorts of noises. So I'll just fast forward through this bit, and then we'll just quickly finish off welding the final arm of the drill head. Once again, apologies if the sound of the drills is a bit loud. So I've started this up, which is just to turn the sensor on and that stays on. Get the piston moving forward, turn all the drills on and turn the rotor on. And as you can see, I'm out of the cockpit, so it'll just do its own thing. Now what I'll do is just let this cycle through once, so you can see how it all sort of happens at a regular speed. And then I'll go through and play it again and actually show you what's sort of going on. Now this phasing of the drill of the advancing just takes, I think it's 20 seconds, something like that. For a full cycle of the drill to move one block, takes about 4 minutes 45. So now that's just about cycled through, it'll reset itself and away it goes again. And now just hit the rewind button and we'll go through it step by step. So the two key things that make this tunnel boring machine work so well automatically is one, that it just inches forward one block at a time. And then the second thing is that the sensor is actually what controls the whole thing shifting forward. Now set the field range up so you can see it, and it's just about to exit out and activate the process. So when it hits that, we'll pause it. There we go. So to go into a little bit more detail, the sensor is set that when it stops sensing the drill head, so it's moved 2.5 meters in front, then that then triggers the first timer, timer number 1 that you can see has got the blue light on at the moment. So that's quite an important safety feature, because what it means is it can never overextend itself. If you want to pause the machine, it is just a simple case of actually stopping that piston from moving. There's no need to muck around with timers and reset things. It's just a pretty simple process to pause it and restart it. So now for what timer number 1 actually does. The first thing is it starts timer number 2, which has a 12-second delay. So this next phase has 12 seconds to do its thing. First of all, it stops the drills, stops the rotor, and it retracts the drill head piston. Not only does it retract it, it also speeds it up as well. It also turns off the merge block. At the same time, it locks the landing gears, and with the second piston, pushes the entire machine forward. It turns on the grinder, which grinds away the last of the 4 merge blocks, allowing the piston and the drill rig to continue on and settle over the top of the front merge block. So once it reaches its final resting place, that's about the same delay time as the number 2 timer has. Now what that number 2 timer will do is it will turn on the merge block again so that it can lock, and then it will also trigger the number 3 timer to start. Now what the number 3 timer does is that starts the welders and the projector, but it also continually tries to link to the number 4 timer, which is actually built into the base. So that is essentially just confirming that it has made a successful lock. So it's a bit of a safety mechanism to make sure that the drill rig doesn't continue on and run away. The number 4 timer will also start the number 5 timer, which after 10 seconds switches the welders off, switches the projector off, and puts the drill mechanism back into life, including extending the piston and slowing down the speed again, and finally unlocking and retracting the landing gears back into the ready position. Now, as I said earlier, one of the biggest changes with this tunnel boring machine is the onboard refinery and assembler, and the assembler's also got speed modules, and that's able to refine the stone and produce steel plates, so it's self-sufficient. The grinder grinds down the merge block, and using the sorters is able to keep those components isolated so they recycle into welding the new merge block. These other sorters allow the byproducts to come out of the machine, so they let through things like gravel, silicon wafers, nickel ingots, and ice if we happen to hit any of that. Now that first sorter is just a filter, and we can send it to one of 2 places. One is we have this auxiliary connector Now in order to connect this to the base, we would need to pop in a connector with a conveyor system below the floor, which is what I did in Fort Rutherford. Just make sure you put the connector in front of the landing gears and auxiliary connector. And there we go, as the tunnel boring machine just resets itself and puts the connector in the right place to make a connection. Now I would pause the tunnel machine while it's doing this so you don't forget it. I'm not quite sure what actually happens if it tries to take off while it's still connected. Now the second system we can use for getting rid of excess materials is to use the sorter, which filters and pulls the surplus materials through to the connector, the extra connector, which is able to eject it out the back of the machine. Well, the first thing isn't troubleshooting or a bug. Well, it's kind of troubleshooting. It's just to do with steel plate. Make sure that you don't run out. If you run out and the drill tries to go ahead without any steel, bad things will happen. Also, I've used the light armor half blocks to make my platform, and each of the rows uses 204 steel plates. If you go for full blocks, they use 425. The assembler only really does about 300 or so every cycle. Something to consider. Now while I've been creating this video using a second drill machine, this first one has just been toiling away without a hitch. There has been nothing go wrong with it. This one, however, I find that the piston pushing the whole unit forward does tend to stick from time to time. Not every time, just sometimes. This is something I did experience with some earlier versions of the drill machine on Hephaestus Prime as well. You can increase the forces on the pistons, but something that can happen is it causes the locked landing gears to rip off the floor. A way around this is to actually, once your landing gears are locked, is to turn them off. Now you can set this up automatically. You need to do the second step first, so go into the number 5 timer, and where they are currently unlocking, change those to switching them on, and then add unlocking them into the timer as well. And then once it's actually gone through a cycle, go into timer number 1 and change them to lock, and then add and turn off the landing gear. An alternative is to adjust the strength of the pistons and do a little bit of experimentation there, even using the timers to increase the strength for certain movements and decrease them again afterwards. So I've got this button here that's connected to a group. It turns the group on or off, and that stops the piston going forward and the rotor turning, and should also turn the drills off. So it will still work in regards to stopping the machine from progressing, but it's not turning the drills off. Now the reason for that is that the group contains the drills. Because I've had to use 2 blueprints to publish this, the drills are no longer included in the group. So you just need to add all those in, and it takes a little while, so you can either do that or just make a whole new group and load it into the button. And it's just about all of them. No, still more. A lot of drills. Right, so if we just resave that group, and it's still got the piston in there, and now that should turn off. Now if I come across any other bugs or nice to know things, I'll try and update the Steam page, either the description or in the comments. And speaking of the comments, feel free to leave a comment, a question, feedback, anything you want. So finally I published this drill machine because I wanted to share my creation Feel free to have a play with it and do whatever you like, whether you just use it as is or adapt it or just learn from it. Looking at the image behind me, in fact, I don't think it'd be too difficult to add a few more drills and a couple of extra welders. So yeah, have a play. That's what this game's about. So that is the video. Probably a little bit longer than I planned, but yeah, I did want to make a little bit of effort in producing this, as it did take me some considerable effort to make this drill machine. Thanks everybody for watching. Feel free to leave a comment, question, like, all those sorts of things. Stay safe out there and hope to see you again soon.